Hello, and welcome to my attempt at a podcast, The Iron Horse Stables, where I talk about different parts of railroad history and also just stuff that's going on in the industry. And I figured what better way to start off this podcast than talking about how I started off in the train hobby in the first place. So that is where we are going to kick off in this first episode, starting all the way from the beginning. And that is, I know that some rail fans, for some rail fans, they might have a lot of family in their blood who has worked for the railroad, and that might be part of how they got interested. That wasn't so much the case for me. I do have a few people in my family who did work for the railroad. I know that my great-great-grandpa was actually a track foreman on the Burlington route in the 1940s, and my mom used to work with the railroads, receiving shipments and carloads and stuff like that. But besides those, I don't really know of any other people in my family who have worked for the railroad at any point, so I don't really have much in my bloodline in terms of railroaders. So how did I get started actually? Well, it actually has to do with my older brother. I'm not exactly sure how, but I know that he got interested in trains at a really young age, and as such, he eventually got pretty much all of the sorts of train things that you would expect from the early 2000s. He had Thomas Wooden Railway. He had I Love Toy Trains VHS tapes. He had Pentrex VHS tapes. He had Whittle's Short Line. Let me think what else. He had a Lionel train set, and that was literally just around the time that Fast Track was starting to become a thing. I already mentioned the Pentrex tapes, but just think of train merchandise in the early 2000s, and chances are my brother had it. So, yeah, he was definitely into railroading quite a bit before I came along. So before me, he was the one who was into trains. So what happened after that was sometime around the time that I came along, my brother, with the help of my handyman grandpa, who I think also had a small thing for trains himself, the two of them started scratch building an HO scale layout in our basement. And they spent a lot of time doing that. And of course, what about all the train VHS tapes and the wooden trains? All that apparently was passed down to me, and I guess I really enjoyed it because I ended up playing with all of it. And I also forgot to mention, my brother also had GeoTracks. I'm not sure whether he got the GeoTracks or I did, but one of us got GeoTracks, and so we also had quite a bit of that. So anyway, point is, I started playing with all the toy train stuff left over, and I don't remember when I first started liking it. I just always remember liking it. I just always remember playing with trains as far back as my memory goes. So it's just it's one of those things that's just kind of always stuck with me, I suppose. So, of course, I loved playing with my wooden trains, and I would watch our I Love Toy Trains #2 VHS tape, which I still have, and I would get a little bit too interested when my brother was building the HO scale model train layout. I got a little bit too curious, which led to some mishaps because, of course, a toddler and a intricate, delicate, fragile model train layout do not go well. I repent of my sins. But anyway, there was that, and I think also there might have been a few times where I tagged along when my grandpa would take my brother to watch trains because, of course, members of my family would take him to go and watch trains. So I think there might have been a brief period where I tagged along. I don't know for sure. But unfortunately, that would not last for very long because my grandpa started coming down with Alzheimer's. So he couldn't take us to watch trains, and he couldn't help with the model train layout anymore. So that was not great. And as my brother got older, he wasn't doing as much with the model train layout anymore. And I mean, that's not to blame him or anything. It's just getting older. Times change, I guess, something like that. So over time, my brother started moving away from trains, but I mean, I was still firmly into it. Of course, I wasn't old enough to handle the layout yet, but I was still doing what I did with the trains. I was still playing with my toy trains, and I was also starting to accumulate more O-scale stuff because we still had the Lionel train set, so there was that. And that reminds me, I would get like a lot of Lionel train sets for like Christmas and birthdays and stuff. Like I got the Lionel Pennsylvania Flyer, I got the Super Chief one Christmas, and I got several Christmas train sets. So I got quite a bit in terms of just train sets. Like literally every Christmas, every birthday, I would like get something, some new freight car or locomotive or maybe a train set. But you get what I mean, hopefully. So that was going on. And eventually, my brother moved away out of the house, and the HO train layout kind of just fell into disrepair because my brother wasn't using it. Unfortunately, my grandpa had passed away at this time, so he wasn't using it, obviously. And I still wasn't old enough to properly handle model trains, so I wasn't using it. So it kind of just fell into disrepair at that time, but I was still firmly into trains, of course. I started my train channel in 2018, and that is where I should probably mention, at this point in school, I was basically like, everyone knew I was that one kid who really, really liked trains. Like, I'm basically like the train guy, train person. There you go. It fits well. So yeah, my YouTube channel came up around this time, 2018. And then a little while after that, in 2019, by 2019, I was already a teenager, or I had become a teenager in 2019. And it was at this point that my parents basically said, you know, you're old enough now. That train layout in the basement is basically yours. So maybe you can do something with it. I don't know, because, I mean, I'm pretty much the only, besides maybe my brother, I'm pretty much the only other train enthusiast in my whole family. So they weren't doing anything with it either. So I did that. And when my brother would come home for visits, he actually helped me a little bit with getting or learning how to run the trains because it's a DCC operated layout. It's wired to Digitrax. That's what we use. So I learned how to operate that layout. I kind of just got it running again. And for the first time in several years, someone was actually doing something on that layout. And I started getting like HO trains. I had a few HO trains at that point, but not many because I had like a Bachmann starter set or two, which were actually given to me by my neighbors. I think I mentioned that before. But yeah, I had all of that. I had a little bit of HO scale to begin with, but now that I had my HO scale stuff on this HO layout, which apparently is now technically mine, I guess. I don't really know. I still don't want to like think it's mine because technically it's not. I mean, it's my brother paid for it. My brother built it. I just inherited it, I guess. But that happened. So then 2020 came around. Of course, pandemic, all that stuff. You know it went down in 2020. But by 2020, I was actually starting to get more interested in railfanning. Like going out of my way to watch trains and take pictures of trains. And I actually started researching more about like the trains that I was seeing, like what the main lines were called. Like, oh, this is the Crescent subdivision. This is the St. Joseph subdivision. This is Hobson Yard. Sort of stuff like that I hadn't really focused on prior. I was now starting to get more into like the nitty gritty of railroading. So that was starting to happen. And one thing I forgot to mention, we got to go back real quick. 2019, I saw my first operating steam locomotive, 4014, in its maiden voyage when it went to Omaha for the home plate event. The first time I ever saw an operating steam engine. that happened. That was really cool. But anyway, okay, back to 2020. Sorry, I kind of jumped between time there. But 2020, I'm starting to research trains more. I'm starting to railfan more, taking pictures of trains. My mom would take me to go and watch trains downtown. So that was really fun. And yeah, that was great. And that basically kept building. And it's basically continued building over the next several years because I've continued to research and just see like the different lines and like just I don't know what to say. Research the different rail lines around me, and not even just like in my locale, but just in other parts of the country and to some extent even the world. Because I started like researching the history of trains in other countries and other states, and I started getting more interested in railroads that I don't usually see here, and I started studying things like the different train symbols, like because every railroad has a certain way that they organize train symbols, whether it's a series of letters or numbers that basically mean a certain town, certain origin, certain destination. But I started studying more of all that, and I started buying my own model trains more, expanding on the HO layout, which of course my brother had built, but now is technically mine, sort of. And I guess all that has continued to build up to this day, because I'm still researching trains. I'm still researching like different parts of railroading operation and, like different symbols and maps and things like that. And history, definitely history. And yeah, all that different stuff. And I think that there's still a lot more to explore, because one thing I really like about railroading as a hobby is there is so much that you can kind of find and just explore and all that stuff, because it's such a vast hobby. It spans like so much in terms of history and I want to say geography, but like it spans all over the world, because of course there are railroads all over the world and they've existed for centuries. So there is so much that you can find, and that's what I like about the train hobby. You'll always find something new somewhere. More or less anyway, to some extent. And I guess from here, one thing that I would like to check out more is tracking trains, because of course I know about like train logs, and especially virtual railfan. That's basically what I've used to like see where trains are coming and going from, using the virtual railfan cameras, and also the Heritage Unit's website, which I've started investigating a bit more. But when I talk about train tracking, I'm mostly talking about like ATCS programs and like radio channels that I've seen some of the cool kids use, some of the very experienced rail fans. So I've been interested in stuff like ATCS, just as like a cool way to know when trains are going to be in a certain area. Because I think with ATCS, where trains are, and I'm pretty sure you can also find things like the origin and destination. Again, going back to the symbols of the train. Like, I'm pretty sure that you can get all that from ATCS, which is pretty cool. So I would like to check that out, though I don't know how I would approach that, because I'm pretty sure it's mostly like a computer program. And I mostly do train stuff on mobile. I mostly use an iPhone for pretty much everything I do, rather than a computer. So maybe sometime I should probably get another computer. Well, I shouldn't say another. I don't really have another computer for personal use. So maybe if I ever get a computer in general, I would like to try out ATCS at some time just to see what it's all about. So that would be nice. And I guess I am still definitely the train nerd in public. And though I've kind of embraced that role of being, oh, he's that one kid who really likes trains. I basically kind of embraced that role, and I wear like train shirts to school all the time. I wear like a BNSF lanyard and a little Operation Lifesaver thing on it, and stuff like that. Because if you're watching this or listening to this, and you feel like kind of self-conscious about being a rail fan and things like that, I can't blame you, because even now I can still feel kind of self-conscious if someone asks me, what are your hobbies? And I just gotta go, okay, here we go. I gotta explain that I'm a railroad nerd. So there's that. But the way that I see it is that with today's society being all, accepting and expressive and stuff like that, okay, if they're so accepting, then you should have no problem with a railroad nerd. That's basically the way I see it, but I shouldn't get on too much of a tangent. That's a discussion for another day. So that's basically the way I see it. I mean, if you care about expression and being yourself so much, then you should have no problem with someone who actually likes to be stopped at a railroad crossing. Because, it's basically the highlight of my day when I'm stopped at a railroad crossing. I throw a party in the car. I whip out my camera, all that stuff. Speaking of camera, another thing that I like about rail fanning is that it's gotten me interested in a lot of other hobbies. One of which being photography, because I started thinking more about just taking pictures of trains in more fancy ways than just getting the road number, making the road number legible, which is usually my standards. Like, as long as you can see that there's a train, and as long as the road number is legible in some way, then as long as it meets that criteria, it's good for me. That's usually my photography criteria, not very high. But I've started thinking a little more about it, though I'm still not sure exactly how far I'll take it, because I still, I'm not so focused in rail fanning for the photography aspect. It's just like, I'm more into it for just the sake of documentation, just showing like, hey, this passed by at this point, just so I can like look back on it later, I guess, something like that. So that's basically where I'm at right now. And yeah, that's basically how I became a rail fan, and how I am still a rail fan. I am definitely planning to being a rail fan for a very long time. So yeah, I guess that's about it. I guess maybe to ask you guys, what was your introduction to the train hobby? How did you get started into all this? I guess you could just answer that in the comments. Let me know. Let me know how you liked this first episode. I hope to make more of these real soon when time allows. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time in the Iron Horse Stables. Haha, very clever connection to the title, yeah.